Hi, I'm Robin. Thank you for tuning in. In the introductory video, we talked about how a variety of signs and symptoms that do not really seem to be connected to each other can actually be linked back to one common underlying cause, and that is a persistent stress response. In this video, we will talk in more detail about how a stress switch that's stuck in the on position specifically can impact chronic muscle tension and non-response to treatment, as well as how that's related to pain. All right, as a quick revision, if the brain perceives that we're in a difficult situation and it has the power to switch us into survival mode, and you will recognize that as the fight or flight response, which is fantastic. And you will remember that it is mainly related to two powerful hormones that get released into the body in that moment, which is adrenaline and cortisol. The adrenaline is making sure that our muscles are ready to run away or to attack. It increases our heart rate, it increases our rate of breathing, it sharpens our vision a little bit. And the cortisol, on the other hand, helps with a good immune response in the moment, as well as making glucose available so that the muscles have the energy that they need to perform. So in the moment, that's fantastic. However, if the stress switch is then stuck in the on position, the adrenaline in the body longer term has a damaging effect on the blood vessels and on the muscles as well. So the muscles are pretty much constantly in a state of repair and they're not recovering completely. And the inflammatory response with the added cortisol as well, that adds to the dilemma as well. So unfortunately, over time, if the stress switch is in the on position, that fear response can start impacting the posture even. Now, if you've ever seen an animal in distress, it will start protecting the vulnerable parts of the front of the body. It will keep a very, very low profile. And we see a lot of posture like that clinically as well. And yes, there are some situations in which desk setup or being on your phone for too long can have an impact on that. However, we're talking about really, really chronic conditions here where the shoulders start rolling inwards. There's really, really persistent chronic neck and shoulder tension, neck pain because the mobility is reduced and you're not sleeping properly. And this is definitely related to the underlying fear and survival response, the underlying stress response. This is the paradigm shift here. You can have a problem that looks like a musculoskeletal problem, but the issue is actually happening in the brain where the stress switch is stuck in the on position. This is where it's coming from, and this is how that's impacting you. If you have a persistent stress response and you say, oh, it's not a problem, I've got a chiropractor, physio, acupuncturist, massage therapist, and they can get me sorted out, right? Well, unfortunately, if your brain is in survival mode, it will try to protect itself against a change in posture, and it will also, as long as the hormones are still in the getting released from the brain and flooding the body, even if the muscles get loosened up over time, because the hormones still get released, they tighten up over time again. And that means that you need to come back more often. Treatment is not as effective anymore. That means that over time, then the treatment has to be closer and closer together. Then you have to it doesn't have the same impact in terms of you're not really getting better, you're just keeping things at bay. And then you're reaching a point where the treatment itself is not working to keep it at bay, and things are actually getting worse. And this, unfortunately, is a byproduct of that stress response. And this is the very important first takeaway message. As long as the stress response on the brain level is addressed, the treatment is not going to be effective and it's not going to get rid of the actual underlying issue. So that's the number one thing. So we're talking about chronic tension, and we're talking about non-response to treatment. Now, the second component that's really important to know is that how that other hormone, that cortisol, that initially impacts the immune response and the release of glucose, also plays a role in that. Unfortunately, with cortisol levels in your system over time, one area of the brain gets damaged, and this area is called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is responsible to form memories and to integrate emotional experiences and to form memories related to fear and pain as well. Because if you're in a painful situation, your body wants to make sure it remembers that so that in the future you're not getting yourself in the same situation again. Now, how does it relate to the stress response? Well, unfortunately, over time, if the cortisol levels are stuck, like we talked about in the other video, then even things that were not painfully initially get picked up by the hippocampus as a painful memory. And things that already were painful, the pain response gets increased. So things that were a little bit painful before then become really, really, really painful. And this over time just keeps getting worse because like a sponge, those receptors then just suck up the hormones, and the pain memories keep getting piled on top of each other. And this is something that creates somewhat severe health conditions. There's good research out now that is linking things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, chronic pelvic pain, but also temporomandibular joint, TMJ, dysfunction and tension and problems, as well as chronic lower back pain and sciatica. Those in certain situations can be linked to an underlying persistent stress response, an undiagnosed persistent stress response. So it's really, really important that those things that masquerade as musculoskeletal conditions, in order to really get down to the bottom of it, sometimes it requires looking a little bit deeper and to look into the stress response as well.